All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of our Rethink conference. This is the first breakout session of an action-packed day titled Accelerating Business Value with a Digital Strategy. I'm Matt Ambrose, a partner in our digital strategy practice. I focus on GTA in the West, and I've been consulting for over 24 years around the world, public, private, and not-for-profit organizations. And my goal today is to get you to rethink how a digital strategy can add value to your business, regardless of your level of digital maturity. Eric?
Yes, good morning all. My name is Eric Obayi. I am a partner within BDO Management Consulting, specialized in digital advisory, focusing on the Eastern Canada market. My goal is the same as Matt, is walking you through, this rethink of and reboot of your digital strategy to be able to meet your business objectives. 30 years of experience, mainly in the digital advisory realm. Very happy to be here with you. Et également, bienvenue à mes amis du Québec et de partout au Canada qui parlent français.
Great. Next slide, please. Thanks. So let's get started. So I pulled this off the internet, and I thought it would be a great starting point for us and the topic around digital strategy and digital transformation, and really just wanted to profile the accelerated rate of adoption of various products, services, technologies, etc. Add to that the impacts of COVID and how it's accelerated our technology adoption, or the rate of technology adoption, by 5 to 10 years. And many of you will recognize these solutions or product services over the years, and even remember perhaps when they were first introduced. But one of the things that I want to profile here is that when you look at some of the younger generations, these technologies are taken for granted. These are just, they assume they work. When we think about back in the 90s, when the likes of the internet were taking off, or the fact of a cell phone or an iPad or iPhone or whatever the case may be, some of the younger generations, they just assume bandwidth is available. They assume it's readily available and that it's going to work. And a lot of the technology in the background is integrated, scalable, works, etc. And so one thing I'd like you to take away from this is, when it used to take us perhaps decades to get to a critical mass, it's now potentially taking hours, days, weeks. When you think about things going viral on social media, for example, you can actually hit 50 million plus users within hours nowadays. Next slide, please. So then, if you think about, why is that important? Think about, can you not be disrupted? But again, many of you will resonate with that or relate to a lot of these what used to be icons in the world. Kodak, Blockbuster, Sears, those types of organizations that were household names for a lot of us no longer even exist. And they didn't take decades to disappear. Some of them were disappearing literally overnight or within a few years. Then you look in the middle there, some of the organizations that have been disrupted. So the likes of, remember when Airbnb started, and the hotel chains, Hilton, Sheraton, etc., they were all concerned about the major disruption it was going to have on their industry. Well, the reality is they've just had to evolve. And they were disrupted early days, but the pie has ultimately gotten bigger. It's opened up new markets, new opportunities, new ways to work together, to partner, etc. So these organizations have been significantly disrupted, but they're still here today. They're still household names. And then you've got the likes of those being reinvented. So if you look back at IBM back in the 90s and early 2000s, they had to reinvent their business model and their go-to-market strategy. BlackBerry just a few weeks ago announced that they no longer support their hardware, so they're reinventing. Again, you'll recognize a lot of these names, and if you look across the bottom there, the disruptors, we all recognize these. I mean, when you look at the likes of Tesla, is it an automotive company? Is it an energy company or a renewables company? Is it a technology company? Or is it all of them? And what else will it be tomorrow? Next slide, please. So digital disruption at work. I like this slide, and I just pulled some images off the internet to, again, get you thinking about or rethinking how technology and digital can disrupt your business and evolve it and help you add value and help you be competitive and remain competitive. So if I just sort of selected a few of them, whether it's augmented reality in the top left corner, perhaps you're the likes of Boeing, and you've got a downed jet engine in Australia, and yet your engineering capabilities or expertise is sitting in Seattle, and you don't have time to fly around the world, book the travel, get your engineers flying overseas, and then working on the engines to fix them. With augmented reality, the folks can sit in wherever they're located, the comforts of their home, at the home office, whatever the case may be. They can use augmented reality and be there instantaneously and guide local expertise or capacity in to solve the challenge. Maybe you're talking about you're an HVAC business, and you've got somebody who's struggling to figure out what the problem is. They can pull up augmented reality and dial in an expert at the appropriate time. This all helps contribute to the bottom line. We don't need people spread out all over the world. We don't have to have them everywhere all the time. So we can augment skill sets and capacity and ultimately reduce costs and time to value and customer service, etc. And then if you look at the next one to the right, they're 3D printing homes nowadays. 3D printers are no longer about proof of concepts or pilots. Hey, you can 3D print a home. You could think about field service work. Instead of having a truck full of inventory, for example, if you just had a 3D printer and the relevant materials, you could manufacture a widget on demand, or even perhaps a tool. If you think about agriculture, the use of drones for pesticides or even irrigation for that matter, tie that with the likes of artificial intelligence and being proactive and monitoring and tying all the various technologies together so that you're reducing waste. Perhaps you're even more relevant with being environmentally friendly and the likes of that. 3D drones are also being leveraged. If you think about, let's say, house inspections, instead of having your people climb up a ladder and go and inspect the roof, they could sit in the comfort of their truck and do the inspection. Therefore, you're reducing potential accidents, WCB claims or premiums, etc. And it's all the more you're getting far more information. It's tied into digital. You can then use artificial intelligence, data analytics. You start to tie in the whole world of digital disruption together for a better business model, more informed, timely decisions, etc. Think about the restaurant and retail space. They've had to reinvent. The likes of, on the previous slide, we were talking about DoorDash and Uber Eats and the likes of that. These organizations are restaurants and retail have both been significantly disrupted by COVID, but they were being disrupted by the delivery models even prior to that. They're having to rethink the floor plans and cannibalizing perhaps some of the in dining space and reallocating it to pickup and delivery space. And by the way, they also need to have bike racks outside. So you have to think about not just internal space, but external space. And I won't go through all of these in detail, but artificial intelligence, robotics, smart cities, autonomous vehicles, all of this is digital disruption. Work from home, we're all having to deal with that on a daily basis. And this isn't, the work from home model isn't necessarily going away. This is going to be the new norm, the hybrid model. To what degree? That's really going to depend on your industry. Next slide, please.
Yes. So when you're faced to so many emerging technologies or even existing technology, you face this complex landscape of options, and you can see here, and of course, no reason for you to read each and every line, but the idea here is to showcase the realm of opportunities that organizations are confronting with. And be that Matt was mentioning artificial intelligence, analytics, drones, all those elements can be challenges to organizations. They can be great opportunities, but great opportunities to seize when, how to make sure that those opportunities sustain, the business objectives and the strategic objectives of the organization, how to prioritize those opportunities, how to detect, and maybe how to innovate around those opportunities. Those are questions that organizations ask themselves, and one of the elements of this rethink capsule is really to help you move around those opportunities, seize them, and plan for leveraging those opportunities within your various strategies. Next slide, please. And so, in order for the organization, to transform and to seize the opportunities that we just showcased here, we always talk about vision and strategy, and here don't limit that to digital, to IT, to business, to corporate. The idea is that in order to develop and to leverage everything that is in the marketplace, the organizations need to develop vision, ambitious vision, realistic vision, attainable vision, but a vision that is putting the organization into the future. And once this integrated vision across the various components is defined, then it's the time to strategize. Strategize on how to meet the vision, how to reach the vision, on how to execute on the vision, and to plan for the various initiatives, the various projects that the whole organization needs to be aligned with. And we are talking here about business initiatives, but business initiatives that are enabled with everything that digital can bring from the marketplace. Next slide, please. And so, when Matt and I got into the consulting business a couple of years ago, the former paradigm was that first the organizations were defining corporate strategies, were hiring the strategic consultant to be able to support them in defining their business vision, and then developing corporate high-level strategy, and then narrowing down the operational strategies within each of the business lines and the supporting business operations. And from then, digital experts were again, understanding the corporate strategy and then developing their own digital vision aligned with the corporate vision. And of course, elaborating and developing digital strategies. So identifying IT opportunities, digital initiatives that would need to be executed in order to support and sustain the corporate strategy and reach the strategic objectives. That was the world of the yesterday, and now we've moved to a new paradigm. And the new paradigm is that corporate strategy and digital strategy need to work together. So integrated vision, including digital vision, need to be developed first, taking into consideration the fact that the technology opportunities, the digital opportunities, are to influence and sometimes to dictate the corporate strategy, the corporate vision, and the same way that corporate strategies are developed, digital strategies and digital initiatives can dictate to some extent, the orientations and the initiatives that are to be developed from a corporate perspective. So, from sequential to this yin-yang or this simultaneous approach, we've moved from from the old world to the new world, and definitely a need for those two elements to be tightly integrated. Next slide, please. Maybe a technical problem here.
So figure the digital guys are experiencing technical difficulties. Isn't that always the way?
Always the case.
So while we get back on track with our slides here. So, it's when I think about, or we think about defining your digital transformation objectives. Sorry, did we lose our?
We lose the slides.
Here we go. Okay. Sorry, y'all. I'll just get the slides back on track here.
Yeah.
So just while Steph's pulling the slides back up, the next one is, so if you can just advance there, Steph. One more. And there we go. Thank you. So when you think about your digital transformation objectives, we have 4 key areas that we tend to focus on. And to elaborate on what Eric was just talking about, how the corporate strategy and the digital strategy have to be intertwined, really what we want to do is focus on what's important to the organization and make sure we're well aligned. So if you think about the four areas, like growth drivers, what are your growth drivers? How do you plan to grow? Is it going to be through acquisition or potentially M&A? Are you focusing on acquiring more customers, or perhaps the customer experience is a focus area and you're trying to differentiate through that? When you think about operational improvements, are you going after process efficiency? Do you need agility? Or perhaps you're in the mining industry and you're looking for better asset utilization or construction, infrastructure, etc. How do potential new business models and service models apply? The previous slide that I was talking to you about how digital is changing our world, just as an example, I woke up this morning and before I even got out of bed, I asked Echo, what was the weather? What was the temperature? What were the sports scores? What was the, turn on the coffee maker, turn on the lights. Hadn't even crawled out of bed yet. Apologies, that might be too much information, but it just goes to show you how digital is impacting our daily lives and how it can augment how we go to work and make us rethink how we work and how we operate. When you think about digital platforms, are you going after modernizing IT? Is there a high degree of what we call technical debt? Are you trying to evolve that? Is cybersecurity a top of mind? Maybe you're a heavily regulated industry. Maybe you're a targeted industry or organization. Do you even know? And one of the next sessions is on cybersecurity, and they're going to talk all about that. Are you looking to simplify your IT or even align your IT function? We've been having lots of conversations with organizations about aligning their IT function. They no longer need to hire for, or they need to evolve their historical hiring patterns and traditions and practices and evolve and get people who are thinking creatively and with an integrated mindset and business enablement and strategic business partner versus what we call KTLO, or just keep the lights on mentality. And then when you think about the adoption, what's the culture of your organization? Is it ready for change, or is it going to be resistant to change? And that's also looking at sort of internal and external. How can you engage with it? All of these will tie together. How do you engage with your customers? How do your internal folks, your suppliers, your supply chain, your value chain, et cetera, how do they integrate? At the end of the day, your objectives, we need to have a good, or you need to have a good understanding of what those objectives are so that you can align, prioritize your digital initiatives and then maximize the return from technology investments. At the end of the day, that's what you're looking for, is maximizing that return on investment. Next slide, please. Steph? Oh, there we go. Thank you. So this is our digital strategy framework. And, oh, sorry, I think you jumped one too many. You can just go back one. This is our digital strategy framework and how we tend to approach digital transformation. Yeah, it's a very simple process, 5 phases. If you think about phase 1, focused on discovery and really understanding and aligning on what are the business goals and objectives or the desired outcomes that you're looking for, what kind of governance and risk management's in place for the organization, what are some of the KPIs that need to be in place to also determine what success or define success, measure against success. So we go in and really state of the nation, discovering. Then we go into the assessment phase, and that's focused on looking at people, process, technology, data, cybersecurity, and understanding state of the nation. What's the current state? What's the future state? We look at the operational and financial performance. What are people doing today? What are they using? What are some of the challenges they're experiencing? Perhaps some of the manual efforts. Then we look at also the vendor or partner ecosystem, what stakeholders are involved, what some of the contracts are that are in place, what some of the potential enablers or limitations could be. And then we get into what we call the art of the possible phase. And this is where there's the applying the right level of shoot for the moon, if you will, blue sky thinking, but then also being pragmatic. We use this as an opportunity to educate folks and help them understand. Quite often, they don't know what they don't know. What they're looking for is typically based on the current limitations of their people, process, and technology. Maybe they're not well versed in what modern day solutions have to offer or practices, etc. So it's the art of the possible, talking about sort of that blue sky thinking, shoot for the moon. How would this work? Here's what others are doing. Is this relevant? How would it impact? What are some of the change management implications from your culture? Would people adopt them freely, or are we going to experience resistance? Then we get into so then we apply the appropriate level of pragmatism. At the end of the day, we can all say we want to go to the moon, but once we've determined what it's going to cost, we're going to change our mind. But you still need to have some vision. What does it look like? What could we potentially need to align with? Might not be relevant for today, but what about 3, 5, even 10 years out? We don't tend to do too much forecasting 10 years out because it's just way too much can change. But it's good to have an idea. What are some of the options? And are there any short-term decisions that we need to think through that might need to or have longer-term implications? Because we don't want to preclude ourselves from being able to go in a certain path or down a certain path. So that art of the possible phase is really understanding and determining what's going to be relevant for you and your organization. Then when we get to the 4th phase, this is really where we prioritize. So we've got good alignment on where we need to head, but then we need to prioritize and figure out what's the sequencing of all of these digital opportunities. And then what's the business case, the benefits, the ROI, making sure that we understand what are some of the challenges, the assumptions, the dependencies, the change management implications that we need to think through, and ultimately come up with that roadmap, that path as to here's where we're at, here's where we're going, and here's how we're going to get here. with a supporting rationale to make sure that all the stakeholders are aligned. As the old saying goes, without a map, all roads lead to Rome. And that saying is going to last forever. You need to have a roadmap. You need to have a plan of attack and how you're going to get there. And the other thing that I would add to that is that the roadmap is not carved in stone. It needs to be agile. It needs to be updated. It's a living document. There's going to be some very short-term tactical things that you need to focus on, but you also need to have some of that vision as to what some of the future state options could be. And as we get closer, as we come to fruition, going back to our business objectives, as we close in on some of those business objectives, we will realize and cement, if you will, some of those longer, more strategic digital initiatives as we go. Then the last phase is really about implementation. So once you've got your roadmap, then you need to implement. And as I say, it needs to be agile. There's always going to be a component of innovation and the feedback mechanism, et cetera. It ties back to governance, et cetera. Next slide, please.
So how, Matt just walked you through our framework for digital strategy. So how these, framework and methodology translate to reality. So here is an example of a digital strategy that was developed for one of our clients in the transportation industry. So, an industry with a lot of heavy investment to buy, even to construct some assets and to be able to transport, bulk material from one location, one geography to the other. And of course, organizations were used to focus their business model around, the operations. And, the top management of this client developed a new vision where the client will be at the center. So this may sound trivial, but this is a complete, this was a kind of rethink for them approach, and the whole business model of the organization need to become client-centric. And so you can imagine the impact on people, on process, and of course on technology that the new model would entail. So BDO was hired to support in the development of a digital strategy that would, sustain the achievement of this new client-centric vision. And we basically rolled out our methodology, and here are the main elements that came out of this approach. So the first one is, how do we transpose the new vision into business capabilities and into business requirements? So how this new vision of putting the client in the center of the various business processes will impact and will require new business capabilities. So of course, we had to consider the client centricity aspect and how the client centricity will help the organization move from the transportation capability and the CRM capability to be, of course, directed towards the client and not more internal focus. Second phase was, as Matt mentioned, what is the current state of the nation? What IT capabilities the organization currently has that could be leveraged in order to support the new model? And what should be the new capabilities required from an IT and from a digital perspective in order to be able to support the new business capabilities that are deriving from the new vision? And so in this case, we very much focus on what makes the difference from an organization perspective. In that case, the capability that this client has to communicate quickly, both between the vessels and between the vessels and the client and the head office and the various stakeholders, was a key IT assets that they were able to leverage. That being said, no CRM whatsoever, no client portal that could be easily accessible and that could showcase the position of the vessel on the journey to the destination. So a lot of interesting assets that they had in place, but a lot of opportunities as well to develop new digital capabilities to support the business more. And once we had identified those opportunities, the idea was, now let's define the IT vision. Let's define the IT architecture that will support this new business model. So definitely consider alternative scenarios. We didn't shoot for the moon, but we tried to define realistic scenarios in order for this organization to reach their objective. And there is one IT vision. There were one business vision, but there were several IT visions that were discussed that could match the vision that the organization gave to themselves. And so we discussed about scenarios, but we discussed as well about horizon, and Matt alluded to that earlier. Are we going for 2 years? Is that too aggressive? Are we going for 5 years? This may be too long. So how do we define the right horizon that will derive into the right amount of investment for the whole organization? Then once the vision has been validated by the top management, consideration of project and initiatives, and we talked about digital initiatives in our methodology. Those are business/digital initiatives. So of course there are pure technical aspect of how the IT function should evolve and how you would buy your IT infrastructure or buy infrastructure services. But at the end of the day, the most important ones rely on how business and IT integrate their own initiatives in order to build the roadmap. And so we considered the business constraints again for reality check perspective. We identified some projects that were already in the pipeline and that were not aligned. So we advise to kill those projects or to reconsider the relevance of those. We determine the level of investment versus the level of recurring costs that the organization will need to undergo. And we identify quick wins, things especially in the security realm that could threaten the whole journey that the organization was initiating. And then, getting back to the fifth step of our methodology, which is the implementation, we prioritize some foundational projects that were relating to the client experience, to the asset management, data sovereignty, and cloud. And of course, the organization didn't have the whole capability nor the capacity to execute on innovative projects. So we went through with the organization of vendor and systems integrator selection. We support the implementation of a transformation governance structure called a chief transformation office that was put in place in order to be able to oversee as well as maintain the roadmap, digital transformation roadmap, and of course focused the approach around minimal viable product instead of moving to a whole big bang approach that could again jeopardize the whole journey of the organization. So illustrative scenario of how an organization could move from a current vision, a business vision, to a full integrated digital roadmap in order to reach its business objectives. Next slide, please.
Great. And while we go through the next slide, I will ask if there are any questions. Please do put them in the comments. Eric, maybe you can monitor some of those while I just go through this slide, and then we'll address those. We've got about 6 minutes left, I think. So, Steph, can you advance the slide, please? So just thinking about questions to ask yourself. really, where do you want to drive your business over the next 1, 3, 5 years? And what do you see the disruptors being in your industry? That's a key question to ask. And then also, is leadership aligned with where you're going? And when I say leadership, it depends on who you are and where you are in the organization. Are you an owner operator? Are you the president, CEO? Or are you a business unit lead? Where is leadership aligned with where the organization's ultimately going? And do you have a plan to get there? Making sure that all of the key stakeholders are aligned is critical to the success, to make sure that effectively you're all rowing in the same direction. And you have to have a plan and make sure that the buy-in's there. We talked about this before, but do you consider the IT function as a strategic business partner, or are they focused on keeping the lights on? Gone are the days of just making sure that IT keeps the lights on. There's been a significant shift over many years to ensure that IT is a strategic business partner and engaged with the business. And those IT resources also need to have business skill sets so that they're not just trying to put tech in for the sake of tech. They're really identifying what the business issues and opportunities are and engaging with the business to make sure that they're coming up with solutions that are going to ultimately add value, continue to add value, evolve the business, help you be competitive. Is your culture open to change? And how will you prepare your people? Change management is always a major concern. You can't lose sight of that. You have to understand who are the resistors, who are the enablers, who are going to be the advocates. What tools do you need to provide to your staff and your teams to make sure that the digital transformation is successful and continues to remain successful? Do you have the necessary capabilities and capacity to achieve your overall goals and objectives? It's one thing to have the capacity, but do you have those capabilities? And what are the gaps? How are you going to address that? Do you need training, or do you need to look to third parties perhaps? Which ties into the last point. How are you going to partner to ensure success? We talk to many organizations on a regular basis where they think they can do it on their own. And the reality is, it is hard to do it on your own. I'll go back to dating myself a little bit, but I remember back in the 90s and 2000s, you used to look for those jack of all trades. You used to hire the skill sets and try to ramp up your internal teams to make sure you had capacity and capability and take on everything on your own. Nowadays, it's about partnering. It's about identifying who is that, what is the partner ecosystem, if you will, and who are you going to be your trusted advisors and your strategic partners, and who's going to help you and the organization reach those goals and objectives. So I urge everyone to think through that, because that's a critical part of success. How are we coming with questions, Eric?
Actually, I unmuted myself. I think it's the word of the last 24 months. So we have a couple of questions here, and I will take the first one. For small firms that may want to start a digital transformation, are there any sharing opportunities platform available for similar companies? Matt, you want to give a crack at it, or I can try to do it?
Sorry, what's the question? Is there
yes, are there any sharing opportunities or platforms that are available for similar companies that would like to start a digital transformation? So I guess that the idea is around the fact that, yes, the marketplace, and we've talked about it, the marketplace is full of opportunities, full of solutions, full of technologies, full of applications that have been developed by specialized organizations, specialized companies, in order to support any kind of business requirement. So in order to be able to navigate through that, you definitely need to look for to survey the market and enter into probably a selection mode in order to understand what the opportunities are, and if those opportunities, are relevant for your own organization and are compatible with your budget constraints. So there are sharing opportunities. There are, bigger solutions or smaller solutions, for any kind of organization. Market is full of those opportunities.
And I think just keying in on sort of the platform comment, I'm trying to understand the context of the question, but sharing and is the new norm. When you think about, let's just say, cloud-based solutions, that has, and if I'm reading the context here, like a small organization or someone starting their journey, there are lots of collaborative groups out there that and I'll just use some as an example. Like if you're a manufacturer, the CME, Canadian Manufacturer and Exporters, comes to mind, or NGen, some of those. I think that might be what you're looking for, but that just gives you a couple of examples.
And so for the other questions that we have received, because we are already a little bit beyond our time, would definitely reach out to the participant and answer the question directly. Matt, you would like to close it?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Eric. So I guess we're at time, and I want to say thanks to everyone for joining us today. Hopefully you got a few nuggets of information to get you to rethink. And Eric and my contact information is there. We're happy to have a dialogue. Encourage you to reach out to either one of us or anyone else in the BDO network. If you have a relationship with them, please don't be a stranger. Reach out, and we're happy to continue the dialogue. Happy to share more additional thought leadership or insights, etc. Talk about your situation. And we wish you all the best throughout the rest of the conference. We had the pleasure of being first on deck. So enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you very much. Merci à tous.